So, hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Authentic Convos podcast with Joel Cleveland. With me today is Maria, all the way from New York. Now, the way this has come about was basically I had a video, and you were saying before, Maria, you searched for hashtags regarding issues in this space, and you didn't really find too much, but you came across the video and you left a pretty in-depth comment on it. And when I read it, I thought, wow, would it be great to have someone like yourself on who has gone through a similar experience to myself and obviously many others, just to talk about it from your perspective as well. And you've also got a social work, youth worker background as well, which I think would be really, really important to talk about, because in this space, I know a lot of people when they're young feel neglected by youth workers or social workers, and there's not much support there. So it'd be great to hear from your perspective as well. But maybe you want to do a rough introduction about yourself and your circumstances with growing up with this.
Hi guys. So as I had shared earlier, my mom is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and OCD, and I have a younger brother who has autism. So growing up was a bit rough. I am currently in the Bronx, New York, but I started life in Puerto Rico. And the reason we moved to New York was really because there was limited and resources for like autistic children, and even people with mental health issues is a big problem in the island. Like in the Caribbean in general, it's kind of like it's mental, so it's not real. It's all in your head, so it's ignored often. So we moved to the Bronx, and as an 18-year-old, I joined a program as an employee, which I joined when I was a teenager, to kind of get some sort of help with navigating, life in the Bronx at the time wasn't that great. I went to a public school with a lot of issues, a lot of gangs, and all this other activity on top of the stress of being at home. So I was enrolled in this program, and I had a counselor who helped me a lot. To this day, he's like a dad to me. I come from a single parent household. So he played a huge part in kind of being that support system and dealing with what I was dealing with, and feeling like the adult in the household, and dealing with like taking the parent to the appointments and then taking the little one to the appointments and things of that nature. So I worked for them later on, and I learned that I wasn't the only kid. Well, at that time I was 18, so I figured myself an adult. I wasn't the only person dealing with this, and I always wanted to kind of give back to the kids. And now I'm in HR, so it's a little different how I do things, more like through events for the staff and stuff. But while working with kids, I was really big on like learning about mental health, what to do, who to talk to, like how if you're feeling some sort of way about what's going on at home, please come talk to me, share your information. Like I would give them books to read and kind of walk them through their day-by-day stuff. It was really good.
Thanks for letting us know that, Marie. That's really important, and that's very similar to sort of what I had, but I didn't have a sibling with autism. In regards to what you were just saying, when did you first become aware of your mum's condition? Was there a moment that you remember that is something,
So for me, it was when I came to New York. So it was a huge change for all of us. Obviously, we all had to learn English to kind of navigate, the US. And she went from working full time to not working at all. She became disabled. She was a welder and a carpenter and a construction worker in PR.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
She was very busy, which I guess didn't allow her to really think a lot, or it didn't give us time all together to experience everything going on in her head. But when we came here and we all stood in one room and we're really in close quarters is when I realized like something's off. This isn't like normal. And then later on at 15, she went to her first appointment and I went with her. I was always like the kid that went with the parent. Like I went with her to all of her psychologist appointments, psychiatrists, doctors. So I kind of learned her diagnosis really fast and got to see all of those medications and comments and things that made her uncomfortable. She was always this really strong woman and did not like people seeing her vulnerable at all. So I became that person that, saw everything, but she didn't want me to share. Like it was just like, no, you don't tell anybody this, you don't share this, how dare you if you say this, like there's no issue. So that I learned 14 years old, like, oh, this is not what everybody else goes through. Okay.
I think that's very common what you just said. And when you're saying that stuff, I'm nodding my head smiling because it's exactly similar to me. It was the same thing with my mum, when she'd be like, you don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone at school. Don't tell anyone, it's very embarrassing, this and that, right? And there's still a lot of stigma In Australia, it's sort of, there's a lot of campaigns around people with depression is probably the main one here. There's a lot of awareness around that issue, but outside of that issue, there's probably not much awareness. I don't know what it's like in the States. Is there many campaigns that go on TV regarding depression and stuff like that, or is it?
They've paid a little bit more attention to it now, but again, it's circulating around depression, and then the focus is always on the person with the issue, not so much the household nucleus. Like I know, again, I now like wish the social workers and the psychiatrists and the psychologists would have been like, oh, there's children in the home. Let me kind of find the program for them, or like an after school program, so they're not, in close quarters all the time. It was just like, oh, she has the issue. Let's just give her these medications and we'll be done with it. It was kind of like a in and out. There was never like, oh, you should bring your kids and do like counseling together and then counseling apart. There was no real processes. And then every campaign is around depression and suicide and things like that, but no one really gives attention to what comes with all of the different types of disorders, and having a depressive stage versus a manic stage, like all those layers. No.
Is your mum type 1? Is your mum 1 or 2 with bipolar? Is she more manic or more depressed?
So the thing with her is she can swing in any direction very quickly. And for me, it was a very specific kind of experience. So she's very smart. And this, I'm taking a deep breath because it's hard to talk about it. She was very smart about what medication did what. So when she wanted to feel like she can conquer the world, she would take one thing. When she wanted to go to sleep and just be done with it, she would take another thing. And that kind of affected everyone. And at an early stage, I learned, like, because the little one is autistic, he's babied. The older one is not really present. So who takes the majority of, like, the verbal and physical thing? It was the middle one, which is me, which is her support system. And I got to understand that later on in life, but it was very difficult dealing with it. And I get emotional about it because I'm trying to understand it still. But yeah, it would be a swing. She would wake up 3 a.m. to start cleaning, and she's like got all this energy and she does all this stuff, and you can't tell her anything, none of that. And then by 3 p.m. she's done. She's just laying there, kind of just lost all her spark, and you're kind of just left to pick up the pieces.
Was your mum ever hospitalized when you were growing up? Did you ever have to go to any psychiatric places and stuff?
Yes. So there was this one time, I think I was around like 15-ish, 16, here in the Bronx. She had to go to Lincoln Hospital. She had attempted suicide with her own medications. So she had to go away, and I didn't have any family here. We came here on our own, basically, and relied a lot on who was back then my stepfather, not any longer, rest in peace to him. We relied a lot on him and his family, and it was kind of like staying with strangers. I knew she was in a hospital. I knew the reason, but I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, oh, I can't visit. I still got to go to school. I had to make sure my little brother goes to school. I had to make sure we both eat and do our homework, but she's not here. So it was kind of like an awkward stage.
Did anyone explain it to you at all? Did anyone explain it to you?
No, I just remember I came home and I'm looking around as I used to do, just walk through every room. And when I come to my mom's room, I'm like, when I tap, she's not moving. So then I open the restroom door and I notice, I had this funny feeling in my chest anyway. And I go and notice all of her medications. And I kind of learned really early to look up what these medications meant. Sadly. And I was just like, oh no. I called my stepdad. We had the ambulance. She had to go. And it was just like, oh, she's going to stay in there. And I was just left in limbo. And I didn't really ask. Again, not speaking English kind of hurt because I couldn't communicate with his family and him as much. He didn't really want to communicate about it. It was just like, your mom will be fine. And I'm like, okay, but I'm here and I don't know what's happening. So
did you ever have to go into the places? Into those
to
places?
pick her up.
Yeah.
To pick her up, yes. And it was I know that it ruined her spirit because she was so used to being so autonomous and doing everything on her own and being like our superhero. Literally, she would do everything. And being in that room and being in those spaces where you have to rely on everybody else and you have to take your medication when they tell you and you have to eat when they tell you, definitely like She did not like it, and that was the only time she was hospitalized. They attempted to do it again, and she like grabbed me by my arm and dragged me out the clinic. It was like, we're running. Like I
Yeah.
ran through a park in Harlem. I don't even know where I was. I was like, oh, okay, we're running. She doesn't want to go, and they were gonna force her, but they didn't get her that day.
Yeah. So she's only been hospitalized once, has she? Or
Just one time.
once, which is a good thing. Yeah, because with my mum, it was basically every year or every 2 years she'd go into basically a psychiatric ward here for 3 to 4 months. And then, that's for probably where we differ a little bit is where my experience was I had to go into these psychiatric wards all the time as a young kid, right? So 6 years old, you got to go into a psychiatric ward and come back out and then go back in. So that was the difference probably with us there. But in regards to not being explained stuff, I find it astounding that no one really bothered. Or was it something you just had to figure out yourself, or did anyone sit you down ever and just say, look, this is what it is, this is what it means, this is what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah? Like, was there anything like that?
No, there was really no one that like stood behind and said, let me talk to you and kind of explain everything to you. I kind of got to put the things together myself. As I went to each appointment and learned all these different words and would pick up a prescription, I would like take a picture of prescription name and like try to find the information myself and kind of understand. And when they would give her diagnosis, I would like write it down and kind of learn on my own. No one really sat there and said, being that you're the next person at home and clearly you're taking her to every appointment, let me try to explain this to you. Not really. They would just tell me, oh, your mom just has issues. We're trying to work through it and we're going to help you. But there was really no plan to help. There was not really like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you this support. There was none of that, which is sad. I can only assume that if kids are going through that right now, that's just horrible. Because I felt like an adult. I was a child, felt like I had responsibilities of an adult, but with no guidance. And it was
I think a lot of kids in our situation would have felt the same. They do feel that adult pressure, even though they might be 14, 15, 13, whatever the age is, they still have that emotional pressure from the circumstances at home, right? And they get and even though people might view them as a kid, they're really not. They're little adults, or they're adults in regards to what they experience in the home. And I think that's what a lot of people forget with mental health is it's just not, as you said, in America, it's the same thing. They just want to, let's say there's a lot of focus on depression and the person with the depression, but around that whole circle with these issues, there's so much more things. And if you've got kids in the household, it's not a safe environment. This is the thing a lot of people don't forget is they're actually can be a very dangerous environment. If someone's manic or high, they go like, kids, we're going to go drive down over here. Right? And they can be doing 100 Ks, let's say 80 miles on the road. It can be a dangerous environment, and no one ever considers that. You never ever see it mentioned. So, which is half the reason for this discussion is to try and share your experience and our experience in regards to this, and just try and make more people aware around it, and that other people who are going through it. It's a quite common thing, which is a scary thing, isn't it?
It's very scary. No one really told me. I wish there was like a guide. Literally, what your podcast was about, and I found so important. It's like these kids need that. Even when I was 22 and I was still trying to help, I needed that. I had to learn all the stuff on my own. I had moments where she's like, oh, we're going to do this. And I'm like, that's not safe. And I would have to grab my little brother by his arm. And I'm like, you're not going. I remember this really traumatic moment where like she wanted to attempt suicide again. And she this time wanted to take my brother with her. And I was just like, no, we're not doing that. And it was like a tug of war in front of the door. And I'm like, no. And I had to kind of like talk her off the ledge on my own. And at that point, my stepfather wasn't there anymore. It was just us. And I'm like, Mom, you're not doing this. Like, you're having a moment. I just need you to calm down and think about it. There's no reason why you should do this. And she just walked out. And we were both left there. And I'm like, I can't do anything. Like, if I leave the little one here, it's going to be a problem. If I take him with me, God forbid he says something. There's no reason for both of us to be traumatized to this level. Like, it was a lot. And I wish there were more programs where there would be someone to say, this is what we should do. This is who you call. Here's like a number where someone's always going to be available for these situations. In the case that she's having a manic episode, this is what you should be doing and who you should be calling. And I also feel like here in the US, they're very loose with prescribing things. There were a lot of things that shouldn't have been prescribed. And there were a lot of things that could have been managed. Like there were medications that I know weren't supposed to be long-term prescriptions, and there were, and it caused a lot of issues. Like once she had to get off of it, it was, it was horrible. It's your system getting off of something that's leveling it off. So it was even more dangerous. So again, that's why I looked at the podcast and I was like, oh, if I would have had somebody to sit there with me and have these conversations and hold my hand at least half of the time, I would have been so much better off. Like she had moments she would just kick me out and I would be like in the street, just outside, like, okay. And I would sleep outside waiting for her to calm down. And then just go up like, oh, you're over it? Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think people don't just realize how much, emotional trauma that you experience in the home, right? And to have that, even that experience of what you described before about, your mum's, you got your brother here and your mum's going to say, do this, like that's happened to me as well in a similar sort of thing. But it's a very emotionally hard thing, and you sort of harden yourself eventually, don't you? You've got to harden yourself to that, right? And that can affect you later on in life, as we probably would both know. So it's not that good because you're growing up. This is your parent. This is the person you're supposed to take guidance from, whatever. And you've got so much instability. You've got to emotionally hard yourself. You've got to try and critically think, which I think is a very important thing. I don't know about your experience, but my mum used to say a lot of crazy things about people. And when you're younger, you believe what they say, right? So then as you get a bit older, you think maybe that's not so true, but you have to try and develop that at a younger age. You don't know that, but you eventually work it out. But that's something I found out as well.
Yes, I definitely, I remember I brought 2 friends home just to like hang out. And first of all, she made the whole situation uncomfortable. Once they left, she said so many things. And I was like, at first I believed her. I was like, oh, do they not really like me? Are they just here to like, make fun of my situation or whatever the case? But then as I got older, I just had to take everything she said with a grain of salt, because I ended up kind of learning like she's, judging people based off whatever is going on in her head and whatever she's feeling at the moment. And she's not seeing people for who they are. Like I had this counselor, like I said, at the place that I ended up working with kids, and he played such a huge role in my life. My father was never present, and this individual took that role. Like he took me in and he knew I was rough. Like, I don't know if you know much about the South Bronx, but it is rough. Like when I was growing up here, it was rough. Like I went to a high school that was 4 floors, it was 4,000 students. All the 4 floors had individual gangs, and every day it was survival mode in school. So school wasn't so much a place where you went to learn. It was a lot of like, am I going to be okay today? Do I have to get into an altercation today? Like, is there going to be an issue in the school today? Are we going to be on lockdown today? Like, it was rough. Like, if you ever look up the South Bronx, you'll see what I'm trying to say without kind of bashing it. It's just rough being in that school and always being on survival mode, and then being in survival mode at home was very tiring. So when I met him as my counselor, he was just like allowing me to be myself. And at first I was very closed off. I was like, I'm not talking to you about this stuff. Like, why should I talk to you about this? Why should I trust you? Kind of having my mom in the back of my head. And then eventually I trusted him so much that I was like, she's doing this, that she's pushing the limits with what she says about me, or she says about my brother, what she's doing. She's taking this medication over this. And I would talk to him and he made me understand in a way. It's like, it's not really who you met before. It's not really who you're seeing right now. And she's fighting her own battle in her head, and just try to keep a cool and collected, calm approach, because she is not herself right now. She's not the self as a kid. Like right now, she's going through a moment. And he tried to explain it to me in a way that I would understand. And I would always be like, but why? And he's like, it's not you, it's a chemical thing.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with you. It's not personal. It's not like it's Maria's, fault.
How'd you find that to separate? Because I found that very hard. I still do personally. Like it's very hard because I say try and separate the illness from the person, and it's a lot easier said than done. So, yeah.
It was so hard. Like I would go to his office, I would slam the door, and I'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. How do I know it's not about me? And he'll be like, it's a chemical thing. It has nothing to do with you. Like he would batter that into my head. And I'm like, I don't know how how do I know that? How do I know it's not me? Especially when she's like much gentler with my little brother. And then I came to understand
Yeah.
she sees a similar battle that he's going through in his head. So she's probably much kinder, much softer, and much more mindful of what he feels, because she may see like he's also going through something of his own that she identifies with. But I didn't see that until I was already a grown adult, you know, like, but as a teenager, it's like, why is she so nice to him? And then now when she sees me, she's ready to
Yeah.
go off and treat me like I'm some sort of animal and I didn't do anything. So
Mm.
that was one of the roughest things I had to, like, to this day, when I get memories come into my head, I have to tell myself that she was not herself. Something went
Mm.
off in her head, and it's easier to go with the strongest one, right? I always saw it that way. As you know, I got older, I'm like, I'm the strongest one. I'm always the one that's there. So of course you're gonna act up with the one you're most comfortable with. And I learned that with kids too. Like when I work with 7-year-olds, if they're comfortable with you, they're gonna act up. They're gonna do things and say things and be crazy in front of you and throw tantrums because they're comfortable with you. They know that you're their safe zone. Like they're safe with me, so they're gonna throw tantrums. And Maria, I don't want to do it. And then I understood, like, that's why she would act the way she would act with me, because regardless of whatever was happening, I was her safe zone. I would
Mm.
always go to the doctor with her. I skipped school to go to the doctor with her. You know, I would make sure that she took her meds. I would try to convince her not to over medicate or under medicate. When she, well, now she still has liver cancer. So I would try to help her, you know, like consider certain things, and I would translate medication and paperwork and all that stuff for her. So I felt like that's probably why she would take out that frustration on me or whatever she was feeling at the moment, because I was like that place where she knew like I would eventually understand and get over it,
It's
I
but it's
guess.
still hard to accept though. Because it's still hard to accept though, because you are the daughter. You know, you're the child, and it's very hard to accept this. It's very mature of you to say that. And when did you sort of realize that? Was that something a bit older, or was it a bit earlier on? Or did your counselor help you to realize that fact?
Um, it's definitely getting older and learning more and more
Mm.
about it. So eventually I went to the university and I decided to learn and take up my major of psychology. And through that, it was mainly because of her,
Mm.
that I took that major in the first place. I wanted to know. I wanted somebody that does this on a daily to explain it to me. And I read the books and all that stuff, and I started to understand. And then there were like a few movies here and there, you know, that I would watch to kind of understand. It was
What movies were
definitely
those?
age. So I got into, um, some of them are more on different types of spectrums, but like I watched Sybil. There were a few. It was, I can't remember titles for some reason right now,
Mm.
but there were a few psychological thrillers that I had to understand and kind of
Mm.
go through. And I used one for like one of my classes, and I was like, "Oh, this makes sense." And you know, and then of course when she got diagnosed with cancer, I was trying to be more gentle and kind of not rebel so much. I had
Mm.
a little rebellious moment, like most teenagers do, and I just was fed up with everything she was doing. But then she got diagnosed, so I was like, damn, I
Mm.
need to kind of man up again, you know.
Mm.
And I did, but as an adult, that's kind of hard, because now I find it very difficult to talk about emotions. Even right now, I'm like getting emotional, and I don't like
Yes.
it.
But I think that's a common thing, I think, Maria, for people who go through your situation and similar sort of situations, is that you have to become so emotionally deadened during the experience, right? Because if you don't, you would just crumble everywhere. And as you said, you went to a very
Yep.
tough school, right? So imagine if you show any
Yep.
weakness at the school, you know, the way kids are, the way teenagers are, you get preyed upon. So you've got to be tough exterior all around, right? So I think it's a
Mhm.
very common thing to find. It's hard to express yourself as you get a bit older, because you've been used to shutting yourself off so much. I think it's only natural to protect yourself, right, from all the drama in home,
Yeah.
and then you got the school. Whereas I was a bit different. I was a bit luckier. Like my school environment was pretty good, and I like sports and stuff, and I had no trouble at school. Whereas when I hated going home, so I hated going home. But you've had school, which was very on edge, and you had home as well, which was very on edge. So how did you de-stress, or what did you do for yourself to cope during that time?
Honestly, I can't really pinpoint anything to de-stress. I'm gonna be very real with you. So again, school was very like survival first, then class.
Mm.
You know, and you kind of get that vibe just getting to school, right? You get off the public transportation bus, and then you have to go through a metal detector, and take all your layers off. And there's NYPD everywhere, there's police everywhere in the building, and automatically you start hearing like there's going to be a fight this time. They're going to jump so and so. And I never really had a de-stress moment. I would get home, try to be in my room and kind of take a deep breath, and then handle whatever was happening at home. But until I got to the program, and even then, I would not be free of stress, which is probably something that I'm still learning to do. Also, I'm now learning to kind of like calm down and relax, and I don't have to be on the defense or on survival mode every day. But back then, it was just like, wake up, stress, go to school, even more stress, and get home, and even more stress. And I remember that when I would go to the program and I would be at peace, and she would see that, for some reason she would come over there and start losing her marbles. Like, she would spaz out in the program for whatever reason. Like, I remember she would come in and she's like, she's in here all the damn time and I don't understand why the hell she's here. And she would just throw tantrums, and I would be sitting there like in behind the counselor, like embarrassed. I'd be like, oh, she's here screaming, there's like 50 other teenagers here that are looking at me like, am I that crazy person that brings her crazy parent? Like, and I would just sit there like, oh, you just, for some reason in my head, it was like, you don't want me to be at peace at this moment. Like, you saw me at peace and you had to come here and disturb that. And it's a different level of things to learn how to like accept what's coming. To this day, I just try to tell myself like it was never personal. Even as an adult, I had to eventually kind of get away and not interact with her at all. Because it came to a point, it was a really hard moment for me. She asked me to take my brother, my youngest brother, well, the moment was like 18, 19, to the movies. And his autism, he's very particular where he goes at what time, and he doesn't like social settings, and he doesn't like doing things alone, and there's just certain things with him. He's functional, but it's just when it comes to the social piece, it's hard for him. But at the time, she had kicked me out, and I had finally gotten an apartment with my fiance, and we were like, my now fiance, and we were trying to make our life. And she called me, and I was like, I can't take him. I'm in the middle of work. And I was working with kids. I was literally, about to get my kids on the line to get them on the bus and whatever. And she lost it. She acted like I told him that I would never take him. Like, she lost it. Now, somehow, some way, and someone sold her a gun. Jeez. I don't know who, and I don't live in a state where that's legal. So that is just boggled my mind. And she went to my now in-laws house with it in a bag. And I had to drive there with my fiance, and I'm like, oh, she's like here. And I started having a little panic attack. I had to go to the cops. It was a big thing. But since then, I just don't see her in person. I can't really talk to her because there's like a whole other order of protection and everything. So I had to learn that I couldn't take on everything, right? I can't be there for everything if it's going to possibly cost me my life. It's already kind of cost me like my mental health in a way. Like, it's cost me that already, but my life, like, that's a little too far. And
yeah, I think it's a common thing, and not that it's story, but what I mean by separating yourself from that as you get older to protect yourself so you can move on. You know what I mean? Like, I almost call it paying your dues, right? You've paid your dues in this moment of time, and you're like, if you want to put a stop in it, you got every right to do so. Whereas people from the outside don't see it that way. They think, oh, you should be good to your mum or whatever, right? I've had this similar thing. I talk to my mum every day. I'm a little bit different, but I'm still similar. I've moved away from her, and I pay my dues, and her affairs is her affairs. It's something I don't want to really get involved in, even though I still am. But I understand exactly what you're saying. So you've compartmentalized that. You've separated yourself. You've paid your dues here. You've done your time, and you need to look after yourself to sort of move on and build your own life. That's the way I view it.
Yes. And it's always, every time, right, Mother's Day comes up, and You know, it's always like, oh, but she's your mother. And I'm like,
Yes.
and I love her. I don't love her
Yeah.
any less. I don't love
Mm.
her any less. I don't hate her. There's none of that. It's just in order for both of us to be some sort of happy, we have to be the way that we are.
Yeah.
Because when we're both like in contact and close, it's an explosion. You know, she's trained me to be this tough person, and she's trained me to be this, you know, I will say I am very tough, right? So, you know, I grew up having to, you know, physically and mentally defend myself. So now as an adult, I'm very tough, and I've learned to be outspoken, and it's like now I pay my own bills, and I have my own job, so I will stand up for myself. So us being
Mm.
together, that's too explosive for us right now. Neither one of us would be happy in that moment. You know, and I give her chances here and there where it's like I'll send her a message, and you know, she's on Facebook, and that so she's there. So I'll send her a message, but once I feel her coming too close and getting, you know, to
Mm.
that point where now she's going to cross that boundary again, I pull away.
You got
Because I
every
know
right
that if
to, and you got every right to. And this is what I
yeah,
think people don't from the outside don't understand is when you say got a parent with that condition or with those conditions, exactly what you said, or it's your mother, be good to your mother. They just don't understand. If they had the same thing, they would completely understand it, which I think is an awareness point of view. People don't understand the condition. They might know the name of it, but they don't actually understand what bipolar schizophrenia, OCD actually entails. They don't understand it.
and I always compare it to domestic violence. I always say, you know, would you tell a woman or a man to stay with their husband or wife if they're getting
Mm.
beaten every day? You know, and if they're getting cursed out every day and they're getting abused every day, verbally, physically, you know, no. So you cannot do that to a child too, you know, that has become an adult and can make their own decisions. I always say that. You know, I love her. I don't love her any less. I love her more, if anything, because I
Mm.
actually understand what she's going through now more than I did before. And I still know that I cannot be there every day. I cannot be there in person. I can't be on the phone with her every day because it is explosive and it'll damage the both of us. And there's
Yeah.
no reason for that. So I always tell people when they're like, oh, that's your mom, you have to love her regardless. I never said I didn't love her. I just said that in order for me to love her and I have to
Mm.
make those decisions as an adult.
What did you do to cope growing up? Because as you said, it was so hard. I didn't have that other school stuff. So I'm just trying to really, how did you cope? How did you mentally get through it? What was there anything you did or that advice you could give for someone with that sort of really stressful situation?
Honestly, I feel like my only way to cope was really try to make her the focus. I didn't really have
Right.
much out. Like, you know, some kids have sports and they have art and they have after school. Like,
Mm.
she purposely did not enroll us in any after school program or anything of that nature. And when I did have my program, it eventually became so toxic for that program that I left because I was embarrassed, right? You know, when you think about it, you're 14, 15, and your mom is coming to the
Yeah.
building there are also teenagers there, right? And you're going through a moment where you're
Yeah.
growing up and you have your mom going there, losing her, you know, part of my language, but losing her shit. And everyone is just like, oh. And eventually, while they keep talking about it and kind of making fun of you and making fun of the situation, I just decided to let it go. So when I would come home from school, I would just, you know, eat dinner at the table like she wanted and let her go on, you know, saying whatever she wanted to say. And I would go to my room and eventually I just started writing things in a notebook just to get that out. Right.
Mm.
So I would just open my notebook and I would just write whatever I was feeling, whether it was a poem or just a drawing or writing it out. So at least that was a little bit of an outlet. But I wish I had like been able to continue the program or play a sport or things like that. I just feel like she wanted us home
Yeah.
as much as possible. She had that
Mm.
thing where she didn't want to be outside too much, so she didn't want you to be outside too much.
Mm. So in Australia, there's a program which I know of. It's called Satellite Foundation. So what they basically do is they bring kids who are identified with a mentally ill parent with bipolar schizophrenia, and they actually bring them together to do like arts and music classes. So there's country areas in Australia and they bring them together and they run these classes and stuff like that. So, but the point of it is you get kids who are in a similar situation as you. It doesn't really matter what the activity is, I guess, but as long as you know that kid, they're all going through the same thing and they know it. Their parents aren't there and they just talk about how to deal with it and stuff like that. And it's been I've watched some videos online, but that's a similar thing I'd love to see. And that would help people like yourself and myself, people going through that situation now, which we didn't have. And it's very impressive in terms of how you cope with it. Like I can't imagine the school stuff because, as I said to you before, I was lucky. I had sports. I played a lot of guitar. I had the school where I could just throw myself into it and forget it, and then I could carve 10 miles. But you've had a full on crazy experience in regards to the stress that you would have been. I can't imagine the emotional drama. So what I'm going to ask you now is that counselor sounds very important to you, obviously. So when did they get involved in your life, or how did that come about? And then what were some of the things that really helped you by having that person involved?
So when I first went into that program, I met my first counselor. She was supposed to be my counselor. And I looked at her, and I sat across from her, and I'll never forget. I sat across from her, and I looked at her, and I said, "You're not going to be my counselor." I was very rough. Like I said, I was a tough girl. Like I had all that alpha female energy, and I looked at her and I said, you're not going to be my counselor. And she looked at me, she's like, oh, but why? I said, this isn't going to work out. You're not going to understand my problems. You're not going to listen. This is not going to work out. You find me somebody else. And to this day, I apologize to her. I have her on my Instagram. I'm so sorry, Nastasia. If you ever hear this, I'm sorry. But, I told her, and they found me a gentleman named Segundo, and he has gone through something similar. Right. Okay. So him growing up in the South Bronx when it was way rougher than it was when I was here as a teenager, his mom also had mental illness issues, and he identified with me in that, and he was able to kind of gain my trust through that, and he would be so raw with me. Right. So, he would street talk with me, right? Like it wouldn't be like a counselor, like, so how do you feel and how are you doing? It was more of like, so what's the problem today? He would give me that full New York accent, like, so what is it today? And I'll be like, Segundo, she's just driving me nuts. She's doing this, that, and the third. She's driving me crazy. I don't know what's wrong with her. And then he would be like, I completely understand. He would tell me, my mom used to beat me and tell me she loved me. And I'm like, it's the same thing is going on here. So can you tell me, like, what can I do? And he would just tell me, you love her. You love her as much as you can. And you do as much as you can, but it's not your fault. He still says it to me. He texts me every other day. To this day, he's like a dad to me, literally. And he'll tell me, she loves you. It's just she's going through whatever she's going through, and you cannot save her from it as much as you want to. Because that was another thing. I wanted to save her from it. I wanted to stop it. Always try to find a way to stop it, and I couldn't, and I felt like I had failed. And he always made it very clear to me that it was not my fault. And I'm so grateful to him. And I ended up with him because I had told somebody else that for some reason, they wouldn't be fit, and it worked out. It worked out. I was able to sit with somebody that would identify with me and would talk to me and would share his experiences with me very clear, which probably a lot of places here in New York wouldn't advise him to do that, but he would do it anyway. He'd be like, listen, I grew up here in the South Bronx when it was burning down and buildings was burning and crack was a thing, and my mom was having her issues and would do such and such, and I just need to tell you that it's going to be okay. You're going to get past this. It's not your fault, and you do the best you can, and once you can do better, you do better, for yourself, not necessarily for her. But he was always such a great support. I would get there, and even if I was talking to him and I didn't want to look at him in the eyes, because then for some reason to me it's like he's going to see me cry and that's going to show my weakness. I would draw and I would have my face down and be like, I'm pissed off. And he would let me. He'd be like, go ahead, keep drawing. I'll put it on my wall when you're done. But talk to me. It was somebody that to this very day, I text him. Oh, he'll randomly text me. He'll be like, just remember, you're brilliant. Like, he'll just say things that I didn't hear at home.
Well, what's amazing to me is that one person with lived experience had that much of an impact on you, right? So that's the whole thing. And I think they come from a place with lived experience, which is really, really important, because I remember growing up, we had a lot of psychologists, and they always try and put you with some social worker or something. And for me, I was the same. I was like, do you have a parent with this? And they go, no. I was like, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to know, because and they would patronize you all the time. They'd always speak down to you because you're a kid, and they would think, they've got to talk to you like a 12-year-old when, you've seen things and experienced things that they probably wouldn't have experienced. So I think the lived experience part's really important. It's just amazing, that story, Maria, just how that one person with the lived experience, and they could talk to you as a real person. They didn't patronize you, didn't talk down to you. They would, and then basically they said some massively key important things then, which was, once you can do better, you do better. right?
Yeah.
You know, you got to go through it, get to that point, get through it. And once you can do better, you can do better. And what I think a lot of kids do in our situations don't realize, you actually get a lot of really good skills and character traits you develop during that time, which you wouldn't have maybe developed in a cushion if we had, let's say, two parents and, you know,
Yeah.
both incomes in a cushy environment. You wouldn't have that resilience or that skill set or that character traits that you would get normally. Is there stuff that you think you've developed with your experience that you wouldn't have probably otherwise developed? Let's say if it was a more
Definitely. So, there was a point, right? And I was 17 and she kicked me out. And all I had was a blue nose pit bull in my book bag.
Yeah.
But it taught me, pardon me, I'm a little sick. It taught me to be resilient, right? No matter what happens, I have my own back and I can survive anything. And I was 17 years old in the street until I found a way to live somewhere, right? And put four walls around me and a roof. But I definitely think that right now, even in the workplace or even through this pandemic, it taught me to be resilient, right? Most people were like, oh my God, we're going through COVID-19, shut everything down, like freaking out. And I'm like, this isn't the worst I've been through. Like, I was 17 years old on the street with a puppy. Like, this doesn't bother me. And I think that I built that, you know, I'm resilient, I'm strong, I'm organized, I tackle things strategically so that I can get things done the right way. And I most of my friends are like, you have this wisdom about you that it's not common for a 28-year-old, you know, like even at 22, I was sounding like this, and people just always gravitate towards me to ask me for advice or opinion or just to vent. And I'm like, I learned this because I had to be in a household where I was in a way kind of like the support system for an adult. You know, not many 12-year-olds have to go through their mom's cabinet and pick which pill happens at what time, you know, or have to help their mom get up because she just doesn't have the energy to do so, or help her get off of something that she's not supposed to be on. Like, it's just so many things I learned. And I think like in the workplace and working with kids, or now in HR, when I see somebody, for example, in HR, you see someone acting a certain way, most people be like, oh, they're crazy, you get them out of here. And I'm like, wait, hold on, let's take a moment, let's analyze what's happening, let me check in with this person and see what they're feeling, what's going on. And then half of the time is just like they're going through a hard time, they need somebody to talk to them, they need support. Versus most of the staff, it's like, oh no, get them out of here, they're freaking out, why are they cursing up a storm, like things like that. But it's like, I'm more human, right? In a way, I'm like, I'm more understanding of what may be happening under all those layers, because I had to learn to understand that from my own parent and even my brother, because, you know, autistic kids are very different. They live on a different spectrum, and he is a whole other thing to deal with. It's hard to get him to talk about his feelings. So if he does share, you're blessed. And it was very hard to understand both of them. It was just like, I was like a ping pong ball. I was going from one to the other. And now as an adult, I can look at folks and really not judge them and just be like, hold on, let me try to understand this person a little deeper and see what I can do to help them. And with all the resources I learned on my own, now I can give that forward, right? And it's just a good feeling to know that at 28 years old, I feel like I've impacted a lot of people in a good way. And I'm paying it forward that way. So whether it be a child that I've worked with that currently even invites me to like graduations and stuff, or adults that I'm friends with that I'll be able to kind of help them go through whatever they're going through and kind of let them know it's going to be okay. I've been through worse, so you're going to be fine. You just kind of have to take your time. And, you know, and even within my own relationship, I now have become way more vocal about when I get some sort of feelings in my head. You know, I don't know if you ever get a memory from like whatever you've been through and you kind of feel down. I've learned to tell my fiance, like, I'm off, I don't feel that great today. You know, like I feel down. I feel like I want to cry. Like I'm very open now versus if you would have caught me even 5 years ago, that wouldn't happen. Yeah.
Now, growing up, did you, sorry, did I interrupt you? Growing up, did your friends' parents or did your friends know about your circumstances, or they didn't?
No. I told you, I invited 2 friends to my house and 2 individual times, and it was just like, I'll never do this again. I'm not telling anyone anything, because she's just goes off. right?
Yeah.
She used to go off. I had one female friend come over and she just ripped her a new one. And the male friend that came over, she also ripped him a new one. So I was just like, I'm just not going to talk to anybody about this. They'll never understand, because I always got that's your mom. You just have to love her and you have to deal with it. I always
Mm,
got that from everybody. So at some point, I just kind of closed the door. I was like, okay, I'm not going to talk about this anymore. I'm not
mm.
getting anything out of it.
Now, how did you go around educating yourself around your mum's condition and stuff growing up? Was it something you sought out on read books, or how did you do that?
So I would do books, right? So I learned. I had a teacher, and I would just be like, I'm curious. Maybe like, in high school here, once I was able to kind of communicate, you
Hmm.
know, in English, I walked up to the college advisor, and I was like, "Hi, Miss Rogers. I want to go to school for psychology. Like, just do you have any books?" And honestly, I don't think I had a real interest in going to school for psychology. I was just trying to understand what was going on at home. Um, and she would be like, sure, go to this section of my room. There's this stuff there. There's something called the DSM-5. And I was just like, okay. It was not, well, DSM-5 now, but back then, DSM-3 and 4. And she'd be like, you can find it here. You can go to the public library. And that's what I would do. I would trek all the way to the library. I would go to her room and I would open books and try to like understand it. And then imagine me trying to like, I would have a dictionary, like an English to Spanish dictionary, and then the books. And I'm like, okay, hold on, because I'm kind of not understanding what this means. So let me go over here and figure it out, and then let me come back. So
Mm.
I kind of researched until the beautiful internet world came into my hands. Thank you,
Exactly right.
Google. Um,
Mm.
until then, that was it. But once Google came about, I was just in there like, oh, what is this? What can I do about schizophrenia? What can I help
Mm.
her with? How can I cope with it? And yeah.
But growing up, how did you reconcile the feelings? So I know I went through this. Like when you have your family, right? But if you went to a friend's family's home, which might be, let's say, they might have a, relatively, thing, and you go back to yours and go, why is mine like this? What the hell is going on? How did you deal with that? Because I went through that a lot growing up, and I'd always be at friend. I never wanted to be at home. I always go to friends' homes and then be part of a family for 2 hours or 3 hours, and I go back to, my situation. How did you
I
deal with that?
would cry.
Mm.
I would go to my room and cry and try to understand what the heck was happening, why I was dealt this particular card,
Yeah.
why. I was just confused. And I would go to my friend's house and I would look at her mom, baby, like what I call baby her, right? But it's really just a caring mom that wants to just love her daughter. So I would see her mom like, oh, honey, what do you want to eat? I'm going to make you that. And, oh, I'll put your stuff away. You want that? I'll buy that for you. Like, it was just, I would be like perplexed. I'd be like, oh my
Yeah,
God,
it's
what is
crazy. It's a weird
this?
feeling, isn't it? It's a weird feeling. Yep.
And then she would just put her plate down. And because my mom has OCD, I had to clean everything. Like, there was no plates out, no nothing. So I would automatically pick up her plate and my plate in her house and like go to wash it. And her mom was like, no, 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 it's okay. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, 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 it's not.
Mm, mm.
And I would come home and look at my mom and be like, what? Why? Why was I given this? And I just I wouldn't even ask my friend. I would just tell my friend, like, you really need to count your blessings.
Mm.
When
I
she would
found it
act
very
up and be
uncomfortable.
rebellious.
I found it very uncomfortable. Like I
Yeah.
remember, like we used to stay. Mum was hospitalised. We used to stay with my aunties and uncles a bit, and with some friends' families and stuff growing up. And I just found it really, it was good, but like it was just really weird. Like you're just sort of like, this is like pretty normal, and it felt uncomfortable, to have that sort of normal environment almost, which is a bit sad, I guess. But I didn't feel comfortable with some stability almost, even though I wanted it, but I didn't feel comfortable being around it. I wasn't used to it, and I thought it was just very, very, very strange. I was the same as you. We'd be like, be very mousy. We wouldn't say anything. We'd offer to do things and stuff, and they tell us no. And it's
Hmm.
like, okay, or they buy things, and it was very, very weird. It's a weird feeling. I think a lot of people in our situation, growing up, have that, that envious or that, let's say, you almost go into the victim mindset, which we know doesn't really get you anywhere. It's very hard to transition out of that. And I think there's a lot of people who have our positions who actually don't, and that obviously affects them moving on. Woe is me, but trying to transition out of that victim mindset or that envious mindset when you're younger, realizing that when you maybe get a bit older can really help you move on. But I went through the same thing. It's a very weird feeling.
It is. And then because like we came to New York, I didn't have the cousins or the, grandma or grandpa or anybody, right? So it was just like, it's either my house or I get to spend, like, she would freak out after, I would say, 3 hours of me being out. So I would literally spend like an hour and a half and then kind of calculate my travel time, from my friend's house to my home, so that there would be minimal issue. There was still like a speech, but I would try to minimize it as much as possible. So imagine all those feelings and not having like cousins or, nephews or anybody come around, and not having that extended family. There was no extended family. It was just me, her, and my youngest brother. And it was confusing, right? I would go to my friend's house and I would just like really question myself, like, did I do something wrong that I ended up in this situation?
Yeah.
And to this day, sometimes I ask myself that, and then I have to remind myself, like, no, don't go there because it's not true. There's other people like you out here. You're not the only one. But yeah, it was very difficult. It was just difficult to understand. And now the day that I found your video, your podcast on Instagram, I was actually thinking about like kids going through this right now when you're home. There's here on lockdown, it's like you're home. You can't go anywhere. So I already was feeling trapped, and I was able to walk out of my door. So I can only imagine when school is at home, when there's no after school program, there's none of that, and you're stuck at home. Like, I immediately got emotional because I don't think I would have survived that.
Yeah,
so,
and Australia, I agree. And in Australia, they're running campaigns here for domestic violence, but only really that. They don't run anything else regarding this stuff and this issue, which is still a big problem. America sounds very similar. As I said, there's a lot of awareness around depression and suicide, which is a really important thing. Don't get me wrong, but in regards to this sort of stuff, there is absolutely zilch. And the only thing that you'll see online from YouTube in regards to video content is basically psychologists saying, from their perspective, the 10 things kids go through in this situation or whatever. There's no one really talking about or sharing their stories, which is quite disappointing in a way, because I know there's a lot of significant people in Australia in prominent positions, in government especially, who have gone through, who had similar things. They must have, because statistically we would know they would have to go through it, yet no one really says anything. And I think it's a big problem because it's such a prevalent issue based on, like, I think in America, I looked it up, 5.7 million Americans have bipolar, and that's just bipolar, right? So you take that and then you extend it out and multiply. That's a lot of people, and in Australia, I think our stats, 250,000 kids in the state of Victoria have a parent or a guardian with a mental illness. So it's a large amount of people, yet you'll never, ever see much done about it online, right?
Nope. And from my time working so I worked with the range of 7-year-olds all the way to, the summers I had 20-year-olds. So that's like a huge range. I'm talking about these things, and I had a few kids that would share certain things, and I'm like, clearly school isn't walking through these items. Clearly the school counselors aren't walking through these items. Clearly you're not getting any of the support. So I would tell them, like, my story, the older ones that could understand, right? The 16, 17, 18, 12-year-olds, sometimes, depending if I had anybody in that group. What that could be like. And we had these groups where we would do prevention talk, because of the, right now, the use of pills and heroin and things like that are, at a dangerous rate here. But I would also set one day to kind of talk about like mental illness and things of that nature, if they knew what that was, did they have any knowledge, and then I would share my knowledge, and do they know what to do in case of certain situations. So I took it upon myself to add it to the curriculum, but it was never something that they had experienced before. And through that, I had a lot of kids that were comfortable telling me so many things. Like in the Caribbean, it's kind of difficult to come out, like whether you're, gay, whatever the case may be. And I had quite a few kids feel comfortable telling me before telling their parents. And I remember this one girl, she was like, my mom, she would never accept that, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what, if you're not ready, that's fine, but I'm not going to judge you for it. And I would walk through all of those things with them. And like you said, lived experience people are needed. They're needed. I have so many kids on my Instagram. Well, now they're grown up, right? But I still call them my kids, that have gone through that stuff and were able to talk to me about it. And they felt so much better going back home after like 6 p.m. was done and they had to go home, that I was happy, because I know what it felt like to come home and still be stressed out about it.
So. I was going to ask you as well. I know when you personally, like, you get to an age where you're 18, 19, and you're like, right, I can go and do something, I can make my own situation or whatever. When did you start? Because there's a lot of baggage you obviously get from growing up in that situation and emotional baggage. Did you deal with that like at a younger age, or how did you reconcile that trauma that you've gone through? Because a lot of PTSD, which people don't realize, actually, you might not think you have it, but you sort of do get a lot of trauma in those childhood, right? So how did you move on with that, or how did you deal with that?
So I I ignored it until I was like 20 some
Mm.
21 20 21, when I was like more stable in a way. Like I didn't have to figure out where I was living and where I was going to get a job and things like that. So I already had a steady job, I had a steady place to live, and I was in a relationship with my now fiance. So I had to kind of address my trauma in order not to cause any issues in our relationship. So, you know, I'll watch a movie about a certain topic, and there was a time I caught a panic attack just watching a movie where the woman was being battered by her husband, because I saw that happen to my own mom. But I didn't know. I was just, one minute I'm watching the movie, the next minute I'm like crying, shaking, can't control just what's happening. And I had to address my trauma with him, because I had to understand, like, we are a unit now. We are a family. Like, he's my family now. So it's like, in order for this to be a healthy relationship, I have to address everything that's going on
Mm.
with me internally. All of those battles I fight internally have to be shared. I can't assume he can read my mind. He can't just be like, oh, she's sad because of X, Y, and Z. I would tell him, today I had a memory that came through my mind, or, Mother's Day is coming up, so I'm going to be feeling a certain way. Can we do something different? That kind of stuff. Or I'll know for work, I'll take the day off and I'll tell him, do you mind being there for me? And he'll do it. And I've learned to communicate my feelings. I used to not communicate those at all, and that probably like ruined a lot of friendships and a
Mm.
lot of
Yeah.
relationships. But now where I'm at is really talking about what I'm feeling, how I've felt, what I've dealt with, and how I'm dealing with it now. So, getting away from that, all crying is weak, it was one of those big things, because I would never really cry in front of anyone or share with anyone. So that's why it's hard for me to even have this conversation.
Mm.
But I decided to. It's kind of like me addressing that PTSD, me addressing the point that I was told to never cry about it, never talk about it. You can't feel any sort of way about it. If you feel some sort of way about it, you're weak. And, now I'm learning as an adult that if I want to create a better world for those around me, and hopefully when they have my own child, that I need to address what I have going on inside first.
It's just fantastic, and it's brilliant you said that I had the perspective to do that, because a lot of people don't do it. And the stuff
Yeah.
you're saying, a lot of people don't do that, and they carry through to their 40s and their 50s and their 60s, and it develops into alcoholism and various other things to cope. Whereas if they just had the maturity and the perspective of you, just to sort of deal with that, and you deal with it at a pretty young 20. I think 21's a young age, because me personally, I didn't do it till my late 20s. I'm 32 now, but 28, 29, I didn't even talk to a psychologist or someone. I think you call it therapy, doing therapy over there maybe, but over here, because going to a psychologist as a man's very, very hard, and it's not something that a lot of blokes, Aussie blokes don't do. So it's something that the government's sort of trying to, with the depression and stuff, trying to make it a lot more easy, but it's still not an easy thing. And I presume it'd be the same. Well, maybe in America, you have a lot
Definitely.
of therapy. You have a lot of, I hear therapy always referred to. Is that
Um, See, my experience with
right?
therapists hasn't been that great. Um, Again, it was kind of funny to see a therapist tell me, "Oh, that's your mom. You have to kind of, try to deal with it, not
Mm,
rather like understand and listen."
yep.
So I had a really funny experience with it, and especially because I would go to the appointments with my mom, I kind of got to see that careless um, side of folks, right? So my mom was at the time on like Medicaid, so specific doctors are assigned for that particular insurance. So the more insurance money you pay, essentially you could get better doctors. That's just
Yep.
what it is here in the USA. Um, so with that being said, I would go there and it was kind of like, oh yeah, you're here. Okay, we're gonna try this medication today. And to me, that always sounded so weird. Like, we're gonna try this with you. She's not a guinea pig, and neither are the ones that live with her. Like, essentially,
Mm,
you're not going to deal with whatever comes with this. at home. I have to deal with it. So
Yep.
I remember there were times where they gave her lithium and we
Yep.
had to get her stomach pumped, and
Really?
here I am, 19
Yeah.
years old, taking her to the hospital and holding her hand, you know, because she had to get her stomach pumped of everything they gave her with the lithium. So I never really had that great experience with when it came to that. I'm learning to trust it a little bit more
Mm.
now and looking into certain types of therapy rather than, folks that are really easy with the pen and the prescription pad kind of thing.
Did your mum ever had to
Yeah.
have electronic convulsive therapy, ECT?
There was a suggestion of it,
Yep.
but she did not like the idea at
Good.
all.
Well, that's good that she didn't have to have that, because it's not a good thing, but that's good. Lucky. That's not a nice thing. So I'm going to say, what would you want to see happening moving forward with this sort of stuff? Like, what do you think could, like, you had a really good counselor, Segundo, who helps you out, and that lived experience person, I think, is extremely important in this space, which is why, I do this because I'm not comfortable doing this stuff myself. But the reason why I do it is just because I hope that someone who sees it, has a similar background, can share their stuff, and it can sort of flow on effect, right, with more people. Because there's a lot of people in our situations, I can imagine, who don't say anything about it when they really should, because there'd be people now going through this situation. And lucky with the internet, we can put this stuff online, and maybe someone can consume the content or get shared to the content where they can listen to it. So what would you like to see? What would you want to see moving forward for people, let's say in your situation? What would have helped you, which, besides Segundo, you would think would have helped you? Or how would you like to be treated differently?
I think that if, for example, if you're going to get a patient where it's going to be diagnosed with a certain, diagnosis, of course, you should look at their background as a psychologist or psychiatrist and say, okay, they have children in the home. So how can we combine services? So obviously there's not a psychologist and a psychiatrist only in a hospital of some sort. You can, go through the channels of the insurance company and say, hey, can we find, a program for the kids to attend where they can connect with other kids that are going through this. And the same for the parent, because for her, I know that a lot of her life was working, right? So the minute she stopped working, it got 10 times worse because she didn't have that thing she loved doing. So now she was focused on what's going on in her head 100%. So I think giving those individuals something like a group activity where they can get their stress out and also get to know other folks that are going through it and are also parents and how they're handling things, supervised, of course, and the same thing for the kids would be great. And assigning someone, like you and I that have gone through something that want to do that, and provide back to the kids to say, how is your day? It's as simple as how is your day? How are you doing? And once the kid unloads, kind of really go through all of that with them and walk them through the path and let them know it's going to be okay. Because a lot of kids, unfortunately, I would lose space in my hands if I counted how many times I heard I'm, Miss Maria, I kind of just want to end it all. And I would just, in my head, I would have to kind of activate all those buttons and say, no, you're not. We can make it. If I made it, you can make it. And that a lot of the times I could see it in their eyes. They're like, Miss Maria made it. I can make it. So having someone interact with that kid, identifying from the jump. Okay, now we're diagnosing you bipolar. Are there kids in the household? How old are they? Okay, what school do they go to? And within the school, are there programs? If there's no programs within the school, what's the nearest thing to their home or school where they can go to and kind of have a space, to kind of relax and be themselves and then prepare for whatever is going on at home. It's kind of like, to me, it was an everyday battle. So if you would have trained me, to understand what's happening and how to deal with it better, I think I would have been better off.
Yeah, and I think the acknowledgement of what you said before, Segundo, to you is very important. I think that I never had that, which basically saying you're going through something pretty shit, and then at 18, 19, you can then go do your own thing, but you just got to pay your dues, unfortunately, for that time and do best as you can, and then move on and use those skills and the resilience tools of resilience, for example, you can then apply to your study, into your work life, or to a business, or whatever you want to do. And I think that's hugely important as well. I was going to say, did you ever have the fear? Because I know this is common. I think common over here, and obviously kids who grow up, it's a genetic condition, right? So. And I learned that very early on. So I was always worried, Jesus, I don't want to be bloody like her, right? Did you ever have that fear, or how did you reconcile with that?
I had that fear. I think that fear came into me like at 17, 18. And I was just like, I don't want to have this. And then in my head, I told myself, you're not going to have kids. Immediately, I told myself, no, we're not doing kids because God forbid you turn out like her. I told myself, I've shared that with friends, you know, and I had to kind of learn that I'm 10 times better off now. So why would I deprive myself of something like that just
Yeah.
because I think I'm going to end up that way? And then you know, having a partner with me that really says, even if you're diagnosed with something, we're going to help you through it. It doesn't mean that your life ends because you are diagnosed with something. You're human. Things happen. You've been through a lot. You might have PTSD or whatever the heck else is, but it's not going to end who you are as a person, which is somebody that cares about people and tries to help everyone because you needed that help. And I live by that. You know, I always tell my friends and people I interact with, even at work, you know, I'm like, I always want to give others what I didn't have, which is a support system and somebody to talk to and somebody to listen to you and kind of help you go through things. So I always told myself, nope, you're not having kids, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. If they diagnose you, it's over. But now that I've been, you know, blessed to have the partner that I have and the folks that I have in my life that say, so if you are, so what? You know, you're not bad because you got diagnosed. You're not going to just stop your life because you may have been diagnosed. What the hell? You know, I've been very blessed with that. And I'm grateful every day.
Fantastic. And what are you doing now to give everyone some ideas? So you said you're a HR manager at a company or HR, you work in HR.
I'm a recruitment specialist, but I recently came into that. Before that, I was an HR generalist. So I try to kind of put my 2 cents into everything, like event planning for staff. So we'll have a wellness events, right, where we get to talk about this stuff. And recently, because of the pandemic, you know, it came about that I called like 80 staff to like make sure that they were good. And that was a great thing, you know, checking in with people. This was something that was so good to me. It kind of felt like I was back where I was with the youth, but now with full-blown adults. So now I would call them and say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? And at first it would be like, they would think it was work related. I'm like, no, I want to know how you're doing. Are you okay? How are you doing with the kids at home? Are you stressed out? Do you want to talk about anything? Is there anything I can help you with? Can I find something for you? Like, if the kids are at home and they're driving you crazy, do you want me to find like a virtual event? You know, trying to help folks. Like, if you're having issues that you want to talk about, but maybe not with me, it's fine. I can give you the phone number for, you know, employee assistance programs where you may be able to talk to a therapist on the phone. You know, it'll be somebody that's neutral. You'll just find a space in your home and have that conversation. So now I do it on a different scale because, you know, I'm in HR. I get to kind of say, hey, we should have a wellness event, or hey, we should have check-in calls, or, you know, virtual events with our staff. But I still get to do those little things with folks. So that's how I implement that into my life.
And moving forward, are you comfortable? Like, this might be a tough question, but are you comfortable with your experience you went through now? Have you been able to reconcile it fully, or you still got to work through reconciling it, or how do you accept it, or do you like who it's made you into be? Like, you know, how do you reconcile it?
I'm still working through it because there's, of course, moments where you're like, I hate this. I hate what I went through and it sucks and I wish I didn't have it. But then there's moments where I really analyze everything I've been through and I go, even though I grew up way too fast and I didn't need to grow up that fast, I will say that it's made me into the person that I am today, and I wouldn't be able to survive the things that I go through now as an adult without that knowledge, you know, and it's turned me into a person that I am. Again, I'm very tough, but, you know, I'm also very loving and caring and supportive because of it. So I can the first layer is a tough layer. I tell people all the time, I may not seem like at first like I'm too open or too outspoken or anything. And that's just that first layer that I'm very cautious about who's around me.
I'm exactly the same when I meet someone. I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, right? Like you're just there like...
Yeah, I'm exactly the same.
With that super serious face. I've always had that.
Exactly. What's this person's deal, you know, and then it might take me 5 meetings with them to sort of, you know, ease up about it. I'm exactly the same. I think it's a common thing.
So now I'm more vocal about it. Like I'll go out with friends and they'll bring their friends that I don't know, and I would just have a face and be sitting there and I'm like, okay, let me just say it. I'll be like, when we're going around introducing ourselves, I'll be like, listen, I look very serious. I may be standoffish to you, but it's just, you know, I like to learn who I'm around before I let you into my world.
Sure.
Because it is my world. I've worked very hard to build it, and I'm not just about to let anybody up in there, because it's a gentle space for me, you know. So yeah, I'm learning more and more to kind of continue to nurture myself, because there was barely anybody there to do it with me. And it's an everyday battle. Sometimes some days are harder than others, especially now. My mom's birthday is coming up, so I tend to get a little more emotional, you know. But I'm learning to be open. I'm learning to be, you know, real, right? Because when you're growing up with this stuff, you kind of close yourself off. And for me, it was be tough at school, be tough at home, and then be tough on the program, be tough at work, because you have no other option. This is who you have to be. And now I'm learning, like, no, I can be myself. I could be soft when I want to be soft. I could be gentle when I want to be gentle. I can cry when I want to cry. I can, you know, have a moment when I want to have a moment. I can be angry when I want to be. When I have that come up, it doesn't make me any less of a person. It doesn't make me any less strong. It's just, I can be myself now. And that's something I'm learning every day.
I think the self-esteem is really important as well. It's very hard. I think during that time, self-esteem sort of lacks during that time. As you said before, you go to friends' houses and stuff, and you just don't understand it, and you become hard to reconcile. So as you get a bit older, trying to work on self-esteem and confidence, which is probably something for most people anyway, regardless of circumstance. But I think self-esteem really takes a hit during those years, and trying to build yourself up later on is definitely something that's going on. So have you got any sort of advice, or what tips would you say if there's any, let's say, younger people who do stumble across this? What would you sort of tell them?
Honestly, the same thing I was told, you know, just do what you can do for yourself. You know, whatever they're going through in their head is not about you. Don't take it personal. It's something that didn't happen because of you. It's not your fault. It's just something that's going on. It's chemical. It literally has nothing to do with you. Try your best to understand it. Try your best to live your life and learn yourself and grow. Talk to someone that you trust, right? Because talking is very important. And try to love yourself in the process. That was something I lacked. I didn't really learn how to love myself until later on. So if you love yourself more, you'll really see that it's not your fault, and you're doing the best you can until you know better, and then you do better.
That's very, very important there. And what's your handle, Maria, on Instagram, if people want to give you a follow?
On my Insta, it's _ Maria Tortilla.
No worries. I'll put that on the video as well. So really, thanks for your time. Thanks for your time, Maria. I know it's not an easy thing, and I appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate your comment as well, because that's what sort of prompted this whole thing, right? So that's, people should understand that, like, you've got to say something. So you said that comment, and then look where we're doing this now from across the other side of the world. So people need to start saying something and sharing online and reaching out to others online if they need to. I think it's really important. So thanks for that, Maria. I really appreciate it.
And if anybody wants to talk about it and they have nobody to talk to, feel free to hit me up. I've gone through it, and I'm more than happy to help everybody else.
It's fantastic. Thank you for that, Maria. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
No worries.